are now tuned into the Misi Muse Unplugged, a pop-up podcast variety show helping consultants along their journey to greatness with your host, management consultant, author and blogger, Christie Lindor.
Hey, my go-getters. Welcome to the Misi Muse Unplugged podcast show. For today's episode, we will be doing a segment that I call Where Are They Now? And if this is your first time tuning in, Where Are They Now are essentially opportunities where I connect with an individual that I used to work with, a former colleague, who had the brand of a rock star. And we have a really fun reconnecting conversation on the show. So super excited. I'll talk a little bit about today's guest and a little bit on what's on the agenda. Before I do that, I've got two announcements that I wanted to share. So my first announcement is this week, go ahead and check out Time magazine. So I was super excited. It was my first global media coverage, and I was on time.com. So if you go to the career section, I share ideas and some of my thoughts on the top jobs of 2040. So thank you so much, Time magazine, for that opportunity. I had a really fun conversation, so check it out. I'll leave the links in today's show notes as well, so you can check that out. Let me know what you think. We talk about a couple of top jobs of the future. There's some other kind of cool insights that's shared. Would love to hear your thoughts. So drop me a line, misimuseunplugged@gmail.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you think about that article. So that's one. Two, I've actually had a lot of people asking me about my book and kind of where is it? Is it published yet? So I want to give a quick update. So right now, I'm actually in the last stages of the publishing process, and it's in what's called the grammar review, which is essentially when, just as it sounds, right? So everything's done with my book. Content's done, structure, designs, even I've finished the bibliography, the appendix, everything is done. It's just a matter of going through, making sure all of the grammar is correct, spelling checks, copyright checks, kind of those last kind of little nuances. And once that is done, then the book goes into what's called a pagination process. And the journey of this book, and I'm going to do an episode just talking about the publishing journey. So if you want to hear about kind of the journey of how I wrote the book, you can check out episode 2, where I share a little bit of that and what I went through. But go-getters, if you're ever interested in publishing a book, let me tell you, writing the book was actually the easiest part. The publishing aspect of it is pretty intense. And lots of lessons learned, lots of twists and turns. It's taken a lot longer than I anticipated. And that's kind of the key theme I hear from every other author that I've spoken to. It just takes more time than you sometimes anticipate. But I think it really helps to round out and make a great product. So check that out. Like I said, I'll talk about that in the future when I do announce my release date. And I'll share a little bit more about the publishing. And for go-getters, if you may be interested in writing a book, an ebook, I'll probably, do a quick wins segment just talking about that and sharing kind of my lessons learned and journey. So stay tuned for that in the future. So going back to today's episode, as I mentioned, Where Are They Now? I had a chance to connect with Jonathan. A little bit about Jonathan. He is a former consultant. He is now a senior vice president at a global marketing firm. Jonathan actually has a really great background in media and entertainment. He'll talk a little bit about that. And in today's career dilemma, I had a mentee reach out to me about a client that continues to throw her under the bus and what she should do about that. So in today's episode, Jonathan and I are going to really kind of give my mentee some advice and some things that she can consider to help manage that dynamic. So super excited that we'll talk about that in episode 21. I've had other people asking me about a previous Where Are They Now episode I did. Check out episode 12. I did connect with Ron in that episode, and we have a really fun conversation, and people seem to really like the Where Are They Now segment. So I'm super excited. I think you'll really enjoy today's episode. Stay tuned for episode 22 next week when I have a chance to talk about the importance of image in consulting. And I have a celebrity stylist that joins me in that conversation. So this individual, she's styled folks like Lenny Kravitz, Katie Couric, Marie Forleo. And so you've got the right expert talking about image. And I think you'll be really surprised. It was really insightful to understand kind of the unpacking of image and sometimes the perceptions that are out there and how you can use image to really take your brand to the next level, go-getter. So we'll talk a little bit about that in episode 22 and next week. So with that, let's get started. Jonathan, thank you so much for making time to connect with us today on the Macy Muse Unplugged.
Hey, Christie. Thank you for inviting me. So happy to be talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was so super excited that we reconnected, and it's just been so many years. I know we were just talking and trying to figure out, like, it's been a while. So much has changed in our lives in the world. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of changes in the world. Oh God, sorry.
I know that's like an episode all on itself.
That's a whole another episode. Yeah.
I completely agree. So I guess before we get started with today's interview, maybe you can share with the go-getters of the Macy Muse Unplugged a little bit about who you are and your background.
Right. So my name's Jonathan Jordan. I am right now in LA, Los Angeles. Really sunny and beautiful out here, but originally from the East Coast. So I've been out here for about 2 years. And really grew up in Virginia and DC area, and then migrated up to New York City, which is when we met Christie, when we were both working at a Big Four. And so, was in New York for about 7 years, and after that, moved out here. And there's tons of great opportunity out here. My current role is really focused around the same stuff that I've been doing most of my career in consulting, and I still, even though I'm in another industry, which we can talk about. But most of the work that I do is really focused on people strategy. So whether that's people and organizational change management, or whether it's more on the talent, human capital side, really what I do is I partner with large Fortune 500 companies to really roll out programs and interventions that will really support their employees to be the best they can be and really support and deliver the strategy. I did take a detour for a few years and worked in the music business. We could talk about that too. That's my passion. I'm always going to do something in the music business, but I did work for a record label for a few years. That was a great experience. And actually, I think that helped a lot when I came back into consulting, working in the media and entertainment space, which, LA, we do a ton of that work today. So that's a little bit about me. Feel free to ask any questions if I didn't elaborate enough.
Yeah, you shared so much in that. Oh my goodness. I'm like, where do I start? So I guess before I even start with some of the questions about your background, I'm just going to share really quickly with the listeners, like how much people loved Jonathan. I remember when you first joined our project team, it was like you could do no wrong. And I remember you like quickly rose to the top, got promoted. Like, I mean, it was just, I think you were like, in my mind, when I think about you, Jonathan, you were like on fire.
I appreciate that. I didn't feel that way though. That's so interesting to hear.
Yeah.
That's so crazy because you don't always get that impression. I mean, the partner's not going to tell you exactly what they think about you. So that's cool to hear from your side.
Yeah, well, a quick fun fact, you talked about working for the music industry. I think you entered like I know this is so random, but you entered like a talent show and like played with a John Legend and then you like won. I think it was like your first month with the firm. It was just insane.
Yeah. Well, so I got stuck in the elevator, and I won't say with who, but let's just say, that project that we were on together was really high ranking, and you had all these high ranking people, and we were on that floor with all the senior partners. And so I got stuck in the elevator because it's 37 floors with someone that was a super high ranking person. And she was like, hey, you kind of look like John Legend. Do people tell you that? And I said, yeah, I get it. I said, what makes it worse is that I perform and I play keys and I sing. And I used to do that a ton back in the day, but I really hadn't done it that much. And so she was like, oh, you have to do our talent show. You have to do it. And so, I was so new. It's like, you don't want to be that guy I didn't want to be known for doing music, but of course, like if that can help me have some conversations with people, sure, I'll do it. So yeah, I did Ordinary People at the Big Four talent show, and yeah, it was pretty cool. I won it, and then got a little money, and then more and more people ask me to sing. And then, oh, I don't know if you knew, but I sang at the New York Christmas party.
Really?
Yeah, they asked me to do it. They asked me to do a holiday song,
Oh my
Christmas song, and I
gosh.
was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was in front of everybody in the market. So,
Oh my God. Like, why am I not surprised? Like, I'm so not surprised. Like I said, total rock star status. So, well, thank you for sharing that. Before we get into like specific questions, one thing you mentioned, you started, grew up in Virginia, you spent, a good chunk of time in New York City, and now you're on the West Coast. Do you have any particular favorite city? Because you're kind of, you've kind of had different experiences. Any thoughts for anyone thinking about moving?
Yeah, I mean, anyone that's traveled a little bit, that there's a massive difference between the West Coast and the East Coast. I love LA. It's great. I'll say New York is always going to be home to me just because, I think the energy and the pace and just the drive that people have there is so unique and so different. I mean, it's interesting when you talk to people in New York, they have a day job, but they also have a hustle and they have just things that they want to pursue. And many times they move to the city to accomplish these things. And so that drive and energy is just, it's hard to match. I'd say LA is much more laid back, but the level of intelligence out here is great too. I mean, I'm really impressed by some of the things that they do. And what I'd say is the biggest difference I notice is the creativity that I find in LA. And some of it is just West Coast, when you talk to people in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, it's, disruptive in thinking. It's why are we doing this? There's got to be a better way we can do it. There's a more creative way we can do it. And so that's one differentiator that I see. And so, anyone that's thinking about moving to LA, you'll certainly like it. The one thing you got to know is that like traffic's pretty nuts. It is really crazy, as people say, but it certainly has its own vibe and creativity out here.
Yeah, no, that's helpful advice. So, well, let's delve. I feel like we could just talk about that all day, but let's delve right into some of the questions that I wanted to make sure our listeners got a chance to hear about your journey. So maybe let's start off with how did you get into consulting? I know you shared about you started in consulting, then it sounds like you veered off, went into another industry, and then you came back. So maybe share a little bit about how you decided to even go in consulting in the first place.
I literally stumbled into consulting. Like I didn't go to college thinking, man, like I want to be a consultant. I actually studied communications in my undergrad. Like I thought I was going to go work in, media, whether that was, radio or TV. And it's funny because it's full circle because I am doing that today. But I spent, undergrad really focused on communication, mass marketing, mass media communications. And then in between, undergrad and going back to get my MBA, I spent about 6 months at a direct marketing company, and it was a small mom and pop shop, but it was really interesting. I was just graduated undergrad, and the guy put me in charge of new business. So I was going to just meeting after meeting after meeting, trying to drum up a pipeline of work and business for this company. And one of the most interesting things that I learned is we were starting to get a schedule for GSA so we could sell to the government. And so I was taking a bunch of trips up to DC and going in these meetings and presenting who the company was. And, I was always the youngest guy, usually the only person of color in there. And I would hang around with these older guys that had just been around the block, and they kept telling me, just go back and get your grad degree, get it out of the way. If you know you want to do it, just do it. And so went to get the MBA, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. When I was in that business role, I think it was the most eye-opening thing that business is where it's at. And if I could, even though I might want, my aspirations might be to get into media or to maybe veer into marketing or maybe the music business, I had to have a good foundation of business acumen. And so after getting that degree, I kind of was just like stuck. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went on a couple job interviews for like super low level jobs. And then I honestly, I didn't get a gig. And so I kept working, side jobs just to pay the bills. And then actually got into a job placement company, like a staffing. You just work a job and they put you in a staffing. Yeah. And it was for like a project management role. And it was like a super, super, super junior analyst project management role. And they luckily put me at. And so that was my first gig. And, I went to do project management and worked at that firm for a little while. And then I really kind of found a liking to more of the people and HR side and strategy side. And so I started to work on a tiny team that was really kind of an internal consulting team called People Strategic Initiatives. And it was there that I really I was like, this is it. Like, this is really, really fun work. If I had to work in the professional services or, in organizations that are really focused on professional services, I knew that that was going to be the area where I would find the most interest, because I think people are interesting. And I'm very pro, organizations doing the right thing by their employees. The sidebar real quick, if you look back at history, organizations and companies, especially a lot of the GEs and those companies that are known, that have been around a long time, one thing that they always did is they valued employees. But as the 70s came in, and especially the early 80s, where shareholder value was like the number one priority of large companies, you saw employees take a back seat and shareholders take a front seat. And what that did is that changed the climate of the relationship and that trust factor between organizations and employees. And so today, where people stay at a job for 1 or 2 years, there's that distrust in an organization, and I'm only going to get what I can get, and then really have no loyalty for the organization. People blame employees for that, but it's actually the other way around. Companies really made employees take a back seat to shareholder profits. So that was a whole tangent. Sorry, I can get on a soapbox.
Oh yeah,
Christie.
Yeah, I hear you. You said that, and I'm like shaking my head. I know you can't see me, but I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
So I really fell into consulting. It wasn't something that I always thought I wanted to do, but once I fell into it, I fell in love with it.
That's awesome. With such a nice, well-rounded background, you talked about going back and getting your MBA. Any insights you can share for anyone that's thinking about getting an MBA? It sounded like you had some really wise sage counsel at that time, which was, if you're going to do it, get it out the way. Anything else you'd share?
So, people ask all the time, should I go get it? I think the best way that you can learn is by doing things. So, I don't think it's a requirement at all, unless you can get into an Ivy, which will propel your career and certainly help you build that network that you'll probably, use for your advantage after you graduate. But if you're on the fence about it, education is always great, but I think even more so getting some really good experience in an actual company where you can, put your hand to the plow and sort of learn a trade. It's not either or, it's not mutually exclusive, but I would say, I was lucky enough to learn quite a bit in that degree. I also worked for the school, so most of it was paid for, right? So that was my hack. I didn't have much money at all, but I knew if I could get a gig at the school, I could work at the school and also pursue that graduate degree on the side, which I would encourage anybody to do. If you can, find a role and they have education benefits, do that by all means, because it's a really great way to, not only work and get some experience, but you're also getting a free education. The one thing I'll say is that I benefit most from, which is what I actually do today, because a lot of times we look back at our education and say, well, how am I actually using this? SWOT analysis. So anybody that's been in business school or even undergrad, what a SWOT analysis is. Doing that over and over and over during, that master's degree, I came out knowing a lot about how to do that right. There's a lot of people that try to do it, not a lot of people that do it right. And that is something that we are, very much using today, which is uncommon because a lot of times we can't remember, 95% of the stuff we learned in school.
Today's episode is brought to you on behalf of the Myriad Muse. 100 plus selected practices, unwritten rules and habits of great consultants. A book by Christie Lindor. Written in the voice of a mentor, the Myriad Muse provides insights on the unwritten rules of great consultants. A perfect read for new or aspiring consultants. Christie dives into her 15 plus years of consulting experience while sharing interviews and anecdotes from over 50 consulting partners and leaders that represents thought leadership from 80% of the top 10 consulting firms in the world. Pre-sale begins shortly. Sign up at www.myriadmuse.com.
This was extremely helpful. I'm going to actually pivot, Jonathan, and then I want to kind of go down memory lane with you and have you share, in our Where Are They Now segments, we like to do what's called moments. And I want to start with this is the positive one. So let's talk about like your favorite project moment, when you were in consulting, either at, your last firm or previously. Like what for you was like a favorite project moment that you can think of?
Oof. Oh, this is good. You know what I say? Oh, so many. You know what? Yeah, this is good. I'm going back through all the experiences to find one. I think I'll say one of my clients out here in LA was probably the best. So I don't think it was a particular moment. I think it is a series of moments that I reflect on from one of the last clients that I had. And I'm probably remembering it most fondly because it's the closest in my long-term and short-term memory stink, Christie. But, I think what we do is we build trust and we advise. I remember a really smart person that you also know, Christie, from back in the day. I'm not going to say the name, though. But they said, we get paid to talk and to think. And I think that's absolutely right. But I think the outcome of those things is that you build a trusted relationship with your clients. And so this last client, I think I've always been able to help and support and help our clients get to value. But this particular instance, I was on a project and it was a really fast growth company. So we're talking about, they went from, in a matter of 10 years, from $0 to $1.5 billion, like super fast growth. And, it's a company out here in LA where it's a family-owned thing. It's super small. It's mom and pop, but, they're growing so fast in their headcount and, they've got to have processes and standards and they're out of their element. They know one thing and they know it really well, but the actual business side of it, they're super immature and just didn't know how to really grow their company in a way that would maintain a positive culture, in a way that they could retain, the brightest and the best and brightest talent. They also didn't have any processes set up. I mean, it was kind of a nightmare, right? You're going from like paper manual processes to efficient, systems, that kind of thing. But what we were doing is I was helping, the CIO and also his chief of staff is really how do we take this transformation idea and idea about, how do we grow fast and how do we transform into a mature organization. But what we actually did is we built that into the fabric of the company. So if you think about transformation as a platform for continuous change, where you're actually inspiring and, moving ahead in change in a way where you're able to grow. And, there were some really cool things we could talk about. I could geek out about it forever. But like this concept of instead of letting change happen to you, you sort of embed it into the organization. And we tested it out. Like we've never done it before. But I think we were successful in doing that. And just me as a consultant, I think I got a seat at the table in a lot of conversations that I've never been at before. I mean, really super executive, senior conversations where you're actually influencing the success of the company. And so it wasn't a particular moment, but I'd say it was a series of things that happened that led to this moment where I became a really trusted advisor for that client.
That is an awesome story. What would you say is like your most challenging moment that you can think of?
I definitely know. So I think it's easier when we think about like the negative stuff. We got some nightmares. Mine was not too long after I met you. We were helping this company out on the East Coast, and it was a super large media and entertainment client, and it was awkward. It was awkward, Christie. So there were multiple consulting companies helping them out at the same time with the same problem.
I've been on those before.
Right. You can totally relate to these, right? So It was political. We had to smile at each other in front of the client, but like behind closed doors, we hated each other. And so it was a global project, but we were leading the U.S. version of this part of the project. So it was a really big project. Lots of vendors in there. Some of you probably work for. We don't want to get into that part. Right? But, there were some nice people, but there were some just really hard people to work with. And when it's not the client, it's like, how much do I really have to, like collaboration is always good, but when there's such a false and negative energy in the room, it's hard to work with that, right? But you can't necessarily go to your client and just complain, right? You got to generate value, just do what you can do for your client, do what's right by your client. So I'll say that the moment where I was just like, and I never want to be in this moment again, is where we got to such a level of scope creep And it wasn't our fault. It was actually several reasons why we got to there. But it was like, hey, we got to wash our hands and get off of this thing. Like it just was out of hand. It was so crazy. We had to get out of there. And we were like, we're done. It was more of a respect. We have to have respect for our people because it was becoming really toxic. But in doing that, the client asked us to transition this other consulting company that was bringing in their people to backfill us. And when I say toxic, like it was just unhealthy toxic, like we need to get out of here. And so, I kind of had to just like tough it out and like transition this work. And, we made the best of it because we were leaving, but it was one of those moments where I'm just like, I don't want to ever be in that predicament.
Right. Well, I give kudos to the leadership team that you were working with then, that was probably a tough decision. And
it was.
I really respect, I so respect when leaders, they see the writing on the wall. They know that, if a client's behavior is not, in alignment with their firm's values or their personal values, like they will make adjustments. So I give kudos, and I'm glad that you saw that type of leadership, because sometimes people don't. Sometimes it's the other way around. I've actually seen projects where the same toxic behavior, but people are making different decisions based on revenue. Your point earlier about shareholder.
Completely.
So that's awesome.
Completely.
Yeah. And that's great.
I commend those leaders for saying no, because it's so hard to do when you got money on the table.
Right. No, that was a really great story. My last two questions before we talk about today's career dilemma. Given your experience in consulting, like what would you say is your definition of a great consultant, Jonathan?
So I think it's two-part. It's a great question, by the way. I think it's two parts. I think you really need to be an expert in something, right? Look, the consulting game is great because we have billable hours and we can jump on different projects and do different things. But I think ultimately you will become an amazing consultant and somebody that people call when you build an expertise in something. So if one thing I like to do with younger practitioners and analysts is I'll say, what are you really good at? And then, if they can't tell me, I'll say, well, let's develop that, right? If you can't tell me what you are the best at in either a sector that you just know what's going on in the sector, or if it's a competency, where you are super, super specialized and you're an expert in that area, I find it hard to be a generalist consultant and really be good. Just frankly, I think there are people that, are great at project management, but what aspect of project management? Like why should I call you? And why should a client pay, whatever they're paying for you per hour? And I think you have to generate that as a consultant. I think the second thing is being able to build relationships. So, and really what this is doing is mapping back to hard and soft skills. So I think the hard skills you can learn by experience, that expertise over time. You just learn, you can learn some of that in the books, but you'll never really be great until you get in there and work with some clients. But I think the soft skills part is probably the hardest where a lot of people struggle. And are you able to build a relationship? Are you able to connect with a client? Are you able to work with difficult people? Are you able to adjust your work style to fit, someone else's so you can accomplish a goal for your client? So, I'll break it down to building that expertise or really getting in on the hard skills. And then the second thing that makes you just invaluable as a consultant is being able to build relationships. Like if you think back past, and Christie, I'm sure this is true for you, but if you think back over your experience as a consultant, there are people that stick out in your mind, and there are people that make it to partner 3 times as fast as other people. Most of the time, it's not because of it's all about who they know. It's about the fact that person probably can build relationships really fast and sell. I mean, there are going to be those that are just like they're in this good old boy system, good boy.
Yeah,
anyway, you know what I'm saying. But like. There's going to be those guys, but I think that's an exception. I think the folks that will rise, and I think the folks that become really, really great in their field as a consultant are because they can, they just work with everybody. They work really well. They articulate. They know when to speak, and when they speak, they add value. So anyway, I think it's a lot of different things, but those are the two that stick out to me that make a great consultant.
All right, awesome. And last question, what advice would you give a new or aspiring consultant on, this would be kind of things you wish, someone told you when you first started?
I'll give you the secret. This is my hack, and this is what I do. No matter how, I'm an SVP right now. Some people think that's high ranking. There's a huge ceiling above me, and this is something I still do to this day. I tried it out early in my career, and it's always worked. So here's my hack. I dare you to try it. Christie, tell me what you think. So and I actually did this at where we work together, right? And this is one of the reasons why I think people kind of thought I was good. It's just because I use this method. So find that one or two people in that organization that have the juice. And you know what I mean by the juice. Those are the people that people respect. These are usually higher ranking people that have a lot of influence at the organization and within your sphere of, your sphere of people that you're working with, right? So this might be, kind of a high ranking partner or a partner that runs your practice. It could be their boss. There's no rule. And, you gotta be have some swag when you do this, okay? But you take that person, you identify who they are. The rule is you can't do this too early when you're at that company. So usually about 6 months to a year is a safe bet. Demonstrate something you can do and you have done something with a client, right? So get in there, do some work, and build a little bit of experience at the, you're widening your network, some people, you've worked at a couple clients or maybe one client, and you've done some decent work, right? Now, be bold, approach that one person. And for me, this was a high-ranking person that ran our strategy division. And I asked this partner, and she was super, super, intimidating, because she was probably one of the smartest people I ever met. But I took her to coffee, and so this could be whoever it is. It could be, a young female associate taking a male partner to coffee. But the rule is you have to pay for coffee, and they'll try, but say, no, this is important to me that I pay. I'm taking you to coffee because I'm borrowing your time. And, if they push and push and push, fine, let them pay, but just make sure be assertive that, look, this is me being assertive. They need to know and feel that you're being assertive, right? So take them to coffee or even to lunch, but coffee is safer because it's shorter and, you say what you got to say and then you get out of it. So there's two things. There's a reason why you're doing this meeting. This meeting is one, to tell them what your vision is for your career and as a consultant. What is my own vision for my career over the next, the short term, maybe the next 2 to 5 years. This is what I want to do. And this is why. And so, spend a little time doing that. And then the second half of the conversation is, I'm talking to you because I admire you. I think what you do is really great. How did you get to where you are? And so what happens is, in this conversation, not only have you said what you want to do, and intuitively, someone that's high ranking, as long as they like you. If they don't like you, then they're not going to think this. But most of the time, if they like you, or if they're starting to like you, they will think intuitively, and they won't say this, but they'll say, okay, they're being assertive, they know where they want to go. I want to help them get there. They might not say that to you then, but that's what they're thinking. When you ask them how they got there, one, anybody that's a partner or anybody senior loves to talk about, how they got to where they are. They like to talk. Our favorite subject is ourselves, right? So you get them to talk about themselves. And you listen and you take notes. But really, the exercise is having a conversation and showing that you admire them. And so by the end of this conversation, you might not feel too different, but you'll notice shortly thereafter, they know you, they know where you want to be, they're going to help you get there. And you've also started to build a relationship with that senior person. I've done this at every consulting company or any division or practice I've been at, and every time it really, really works and helps my career.
Well, I think you just gave the mic drop of all advice I have heard, because you just dropped a real secret there. So go-getters, if you're listening to this, I think you better rewind and take a page from Jonathan's playbook. I've been a testament. Jonathan came in on fire. Within a year, he got promoted, which is, for those who know the consulting environment, coming in as an experienced hire, you're already kind of at a disadvantage. And so he came in guns a-blazing. And so these sound like proven techniques. So thank you for sharing them with us, for sure.
One thing I'll add to that too is that it's important that you show assertiveness and boldness, right? This isn't a chance for you to brag, but this is a chance for you to say, hey, I know what I want to get. I know what I want, and I know how to get there. And this is what I'm doing with or without you. And you're not saying that at all, but you're just saying, this is what I want to do. And usually, especially if you're a person of color or, a minority, man, people will get behind that. It's not right, but it's the truth, right? And I'm just keeping it real here. That is the truth. So, it's important, especially for, people of color, different genders, like let's be bold, let's not be brash with it, but let's be bold and assertive. And, sometimes speaking up is all you need to do.
Hey, go-getters. Have feedback on today's show? Questions on consulting? Want to be a guest? We'd love to hear from you. Just drop us a line at mycmuseunplugged@gmail.com. That's mycmuseunplugged@gmail.com. You can also show us your support by downloading episodes, spreading the word to friends and family, or leaving us a review. Remember, Mysi Muse Unplugged is a pop-up podcast, which means we'll stick around as long as we continue to hear from you. Thank you for your support. Now back to today's show. Well said. So I'm actually going to pivot, Jonathan. I want to get back to the career dilemma I mentioned at the top of the episode,
right,
and want to, have you help me give, it's her name is Cassandra, help give Cassandra some advice. Does that sound good to you?
Sure.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to just read the email that I got from Cassandra I got it about a couple days ago. So Cassandra writes, "Hey, Christie, I've been recently placed in a workstream lead role with a team of 3 analysts with the goal of going up for promotion to manager next year. I was excited to be given this level of responsibility, but my client is pretty unpredictable. My client continues to make verbal commitments or agree with my approach when we talk in passing. But then when it comes time to be in meetings, she completely throws me or members of my team under the bus, sometimes acting surprised as if we've never had a conversation. I'm getting nervous because there are pieces of data that her team has in their possession that we need in order to complete our analysis, but she will accept meeting invites, then ghost or cancel them at the last minute. This is causing me a lot of anxiety because I have a lot riding on this role. What are some things that I can do, Christie, to, really create more accountability with my client, but in a way that I can, really build a relationship with her? Thanks, Cassandra." So
Oof, that's right.
It's a tough one. Yeah. When you hear this, Jonathan, what is kind of some things that come to mind of what Cassandra can do?
Okay. So a couple of things here. One, I sympathize because I think anybody that's been a consultant long enough, this is a great war story. I think, Christie, you probably have some of these type of stories to talk about. These are the type of stories we talk about after, dinner and drinks, right? But, so I think what you're going through, one, just know you're not alone. I've been in this predicament before. I think there's a couple of things just to remind yourself about. And then one thing, I'll make one recommendation. A couple of things to remember, right? We're in the professional services industry. And so we get hired for many different reasons. Sometimes we get hired to actually help. Sometimes we're hired to literally be the scapegoat, right? And it sounds like, I don't have enough data points to make a firm assessment as to what's going on, but it sounds like, this lack of accountability is not just you, right? This is probably a theme of something that's been going on. Throwing someone on the bus is probably, if it's not you, it's probably somebody else. If she's ghosting, I think it was a she, right? If she's ghosting in meetings, right? If she's not showing up, that's probably a theme. It's probably been happening for a long time. I don't think it's just you, but the difference is that you're in this predicament and you're hoping to control your environment. So there's a couple things. One, you're probably being thrown on the bus and you're there literally to be the scapegoat. So that's something you're just going to have to accept. I would not take this personal at all. I would think that, I would remind myself that this has probably been going on for a long time. It is it's a work style. It is a behavior that has probably been long underway. A couple other things too. You're not going to be able to control your client, which is nerve-wracking because for anybody that's in consulting, most of us are type A. We like to be in charge and demand. What happens is when you get pushback, and there's a really great executive coach. I'm trying to remember his name right now. I can't remember, but Christie, I'll send it to you. Maybe you can share it from the notes. But there's a really great executive coach. But initially, basically, he coaches consultants and senior consultants that When you start to get pushback, the last thing we want to do is push against that pushback, right? What we want to do is pull, right? So if we can't push a client to, make a decision or move forward with the plan that we have, what we really need to do is pull them in. And, there's 3 steps that he takes, and then I'll give my opinion. But I've used his advice many times. So 1, sit your client down and just ask questions, ask smart questions, right? Play back what you heard. And then at some point, they'll ask you what you think we should do. But I think the exercise of just demonstrating over time that you're not pushing an agenda, if anything, you're pulling them in by asking questions and making them feel like they're heard and they're the most important person in the room. Many times, they might say the dumbest thing, or they might have a horrible idea, or the client just might be out of their mind. But if they feel heard, and if they feel like they're the most important person, then many times a lot of those things that are kind of causing havoc in the relationship will go away. And so then you can kind of get at a deeper level and gain their trust. So I think some of the symptoms of what you're seeing is a deeper issue around gaining the trust of that person and really meeting them at where they're at. Here's what I would do though, and this is what I did in the past. I would get the client out from work. You probably don't know them that well, but if you can get them out of the workplace, go get coffee, go get a drink, like especially if they drink or happy hours, like take them to a happy hour. Like get to know them as a person and build that relationship. Look, you might not hit it off, but I think they'll see that you want to get to know them and it's not just always about the work. Again, consultants, type A people, we always tend to be, just work oriented and drive. But our clients are pitch there. Many times when you're back in the workplace, you can get much more accomplished, by building that relationship out. So that's what I would do. I'd get them out of the workplace, maybe put some alcohol in them if they drink. If they don't drink, take them a coffee, do something fun, right? Make it not about the work, get to know who they are, their family, what they like to do, build that relationship, and then you'll usually see that materialize on the business side.
Awesome. I love the 3 tips from the coach. You'll have to keep me posted if you come across the name of that coach you mentioned. Really, really good advice. I'm going to add a couple more just to kind of round out like a different perspective to what you just shared, Jonathan. So I like how you kind of, you kind of framed it in terms of, the kind of the individual caring and feeding of that relationship. And I think that's a really great way to look at it. I think some other things that, Cassandra maybe consider as well, in addition to what Jonathan shared, is kind of, it sounds like, that there may be, and I think you kind of alluded to this, Jonathan, there may be some organizational politics at play, right? And understanding, so, you talked about being in the position of a scapegoat. I would try to kind of, do a little bit of recon, figure out what's going on, if chances are you're not the first one, but talk to your leadership, figure out, have they seen this type of behavior? Right. If you can, talk to some of her colleagues, talk to some of, if she's got employees or if she's got, other kind of peers in parallel business units, try to figure out like, what is the root cause? Because it sounds like there is a resistance and that's her tactic. So her tactic is to stall. It's to, create the element of surprise and all of that. But to me, that's all kind of noise for something, like you said, deeper, for sure. Yeah. So looking at the organizational politics, figuring out, and talking to people around her to kind of see how you can connect the dots to get a really good pulse of what's happening. I like how you said, Jonathan, don't take it personal, but keeping your leadership involved. I remember I was in a similar situation, over a decade ago. And I actually ended up setting up weekly calls with my management team, with my leadership, because they knew, this person had a kind of a similar type of volatile personality, and she was a really critical stakeholder. So I had meetings, I would share kind of what I was doing and what was the outcome of that. And, they were giving me advice. And to your point, actually having leadership kind of work with me through that scenario, I actually ended up building really good relationships with them, because we were able to be successful in a way that we managed that dynamic, and I learned a ton. So this is a great learning opportunity. And the last thing I'm going to add, Cassandra, is document. So you mentioned, that, she's kind of, skipping on verbal commitments and just kind of changing things in the fly. I think, here's where sometimes you have to, in addition to the relationship building, you kind of have to get a little bit more formal and make sure you're documenting, you're sending emails, you have meeting agendas, you've got meeting notes. So there's a paper trail, because regardless if you're a scapegoat or not, your firm still has to deliver, right? And there is contractual obligations at play here. And so you want to make sure you kind of cover yourself and talk to your leadership to see, what that could potentially mean. One piece of advice I had, one of my first team leads share with me over 15 years ago, and I still follow this concept to this day. I remember he told me, I never forget it. He's like, Christie, if it's not written, it does not exist. And I think that's just so true. So take that with that advice. This was really great. I don't know if you got anything else you wanted to share, Jonathan.
I was just going to say that the name of that coach, the executive coach, was Dr. J.M. Perry.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm
awesome.
sure you heard. He's been around for quite a while, and he works with all the top consulting companies, banks, technology companies. So he has this audio series called The Pull Recipe, which is really about letting your clients have their way. But it is probably the most valuable piece of coaching I've gotten from anybody ever.
Awesome.
So check it out.
Awesome. Well, Thank you so much for your time with this. So Cassandra, hopefully, run with those tips and keep me posted on how you land. But Jonathan, it was such a great pleasure to connect with you. This was great.
Congrats to you. I mean, this you're killing it. Like I love what you're doing. Keep doing it, because I think you're helping a lot of people. There's a lot of folks that are either stumbling into this industry or they've been around. They just haven't had a chance to listen to others in this industry and their problems, and you're giving a lot of great advice. So congrats to you for what you're doing. Keep doing it, and I'm just honored that you had me call in.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. Like I said, I have to figure out what your superlative is, because your mic drop advice on younger, that was amazing. So I haven't figured out what the title is, but I'll keep you posted, Jonathan.
Yeah, and by the way, that's a hack. So share it with other people. Yeah, it's a total hack. It works every time.
Absolutely. Right. Awesome. Well, that wraps up today's episode. So go-getters, if you have a particular question or feedback, feel free to drop us a line at MacyMuseUnplugged@gmail.com. Again, that's MacyMuseUnplugged@gmail.com. I'd like to again thank Jonathan for being a guest on today's show, and thank you, my go-getters, for tuning in. This is Christie Lindor signing out for the Macy Muse Unplugged pop-up podcast. Here's to your journey to greatness.
Tune in every Friday for new episodes syndicated on iTunes, Google Play Music, and many more. Visit www.macymuse.com for more information.